Hi, I'm Blake Rayhans.
And I'm Stacie Mallon.
And you are listening to the Optimized AF podcast.
We know life is hard. We're here to make it simple.
And we're back for another episode of the Optimized AF podcast. Welcome, everybody. I am Blake Rayhans.
And I'm Stacie Mallon. And if you wondered, Blake always does the intro because we start laughing right before he says something every time. And I don't have the, I can't reel it back in.
you can't bring it back to focus. Well, here's the thing,
Blake
though,
can
everybody.
shut it down.
Here's my secret. I'm the reason we're laughing.
It's true.
So you hear the intro music. By the way, I'm playing the air drums every time. So.
Yeah, and on our thumbnail, I am looking at Blake laughing. It's pretty on point.
No, it is. That's a pretty clear image of how it usually is for us.
And we have a guest today. So this is my favorite days when we have guests. We have Ted Liles here, and he's going to talk to us about mindset and motivation and leadership. And this has been a theme for us probably for the last, I don't know, it feels like 5
or 6 episodes probably. Yeah.
And let me tell you a little story about a common denominator. And this person is a super connector in the Valley, and we're going to give him a shout out. Maybe we'll have him on at some point. He's a really good man. Andrew Kolikoff does some networking events, and that is where Ted and I originally met. So shout out to Andrew. But interesting point, Andrew is also how I met Blake with a couple of degrees of separation. Andrew introduced me to Ali Parnian. And that is how I got to Execute to Win. And then that's where Blake and I met. So Andrew is really ultimately responsible for our connection. And then I'm having lunch with Topher Overstreet today as well. And I met him at one of Andrew's events. So shout out to Andrew, who's an amazing connector here in the Valley and a really, really good man who does good things out of really his motivation is to connect people. So I think that is telling to how he intentionally, I think, has one connection a day that he makes. That's part of his mantra. And he does lunches and meets up with people to continue those connections. So really kind of a good theme for today. Ted, you want to tell us a little bit about yourself and your life, maybe as well as your professional life, what motivates you, and just happy to have you here.
Yeah, great. Blake, Stacie, thank you so much for having me on today. A little bit about me. Ted Liles. I'm an industrial specialist at Cressa, the world's largest tenant rep, occupier rep real estate platform. I run the industrial division in Arizona, and I've recently stepped in to be the co-chair of North America's industrial practice. So I oversee the initiatives of about 140, 150 people nationally. I've got a 6-year-old son and a 4-year-old daughter. I've been married for 11 years, and life is really, really great right now. But I think, one of the components that you wanted me to dive into a little bit today was, motivation, which is a major factor of my life, as well as kind of where I was and where I am now.
Yeah. And I'll tell a little story. What brought Ted on today was we were talking about motivation. I said, there's this guy that used to do Motivation Monday emails, and I love them. I look forward to them. And again, I look forward to being in the studio. We've talked about this a lot. Learn what lights you up is a big mantra for us. And so I reached back out to you and I said, hey, are you still doing that? Because I haven't seen him, but my email address has changed. And you told me a little bit of a story of your journey recently, and what you're going to be kind of relaunching and doing those motivations. So
exactly. I'm working on version 2.0 right now, but for about 2 years, I sent out a Motivate Me Monday almost every Monday, just kind of to friends and family and my coworkers, and just trying to get the mindset right for the week, and understanding that sometimes you get kicked in the shins and you have to write thank you letters about it. It's just kind of a part of
yep.
of learning. But in full transparency, right when COVID hit, it was really hard to remain positive and motivated. I mean, my business kind of fell apart. I thought the world was going to come to an end. I was stuck in a house, having to play parent and teacher and babysitter while trying to work and keep things together. And it was just kind of all unraveling. And I was absolutely probably in one of my darkest holes that I've been into for a long time. So I'm very lucky in terms of kind of falling back on my feet and working a lot and being back in a position where I'm in the office with my team. And I've got kind of that fire back in my belly. But it was really hard for me to write positive messages and trying to put out a positive message when I personally just was like, just in the dumps.
Yeah. On our last episode, we said we're hearing from a lot of people. We want 2020 to be over. And our point on the last episode was, well, nothing's changing January 1st unless you change it, because it's a mindset game and that nothing is ever going to be exactly how it was before. And if you're waiting for that to happen, you're going to be waiting for a long time because that may never happen. I think there's been a lot of positives if you really search for the positive, and sometimes you don't even have to search that far. I think you probably being home with your children. I don't know about myself. There were definitely some frustrations, but I for them, I was more around than I ever have been as a serial entrepreneur. I know, Blake, you guys as children aren't too far in age.
No, again, 6.5 and a 3-year-old. And I too found myself as just like, I have to make the best of this situation. It was very difficult. And I was found myself, again, similar to you, found myself in a hole saying, how the heck am I going to find some positive in this situation? And I actually want to throw that question back to you, because at the time I'd actually lost my job. And so I didn't have a team, but you still had people that were looking to you outside of even your family unit. So can you talk to us a little bit about the moment where you said, maybe realized, hey, I've gone into this space that I'm not comfortable with. This isn't me. And I need to pull myself out because I need to be a shining example for other people. Or what was that process like for you?
Yeah. I mean, I think really where it kind of came in, I saw it happening was working from home. Our office was closed. It was kind of like, don't go in. And I realized that I needed to be in because I'm not a good manager unless I'm in person. I'm trying to work to be better about being able to manage people when I'm not with them. But really, after like 2 weeks of just kind of being in a rough zone, I realized that I was working. While I was working, I was taking a 45-minute nap at like 11 o'clock in the day, and then at 3 o'clock I'd take another 45-minute nap, and I'm like, what am I doing? Like, I am programmed to work. I love working. I love the hustle. This just doesn't work for me, and I need to change that right away. So I told my wife, I said, look, our office is closed, but I got a key and nobody's working right now, so I'm going to be going into the office. And at the same time, we were lucky enough to find childcare for our kids during the day. And as soon as that first day happened in the office, I just said, look, I'm back. Like I need to mentally be there. I'm going to encourage my team to come in. It was not forcing them. It was more so come in, if you feel comfortable with it. But I needed to be in the zone. And so I get in the office at 6:30 or 7 and work until 4 so that, when I could be home, I could be engaged with the kids. So once that started to happen, I just said, man, I'm back. I need to figure this out. I need to hustle and try to get back, positive momentum.
I think one thing we've talked a lot about is find what works for you. I had moved right at the beginning of COVID, among all the other changes in my life. But Blake and I both lost our jobs and lost our clients. So for a while, I think everybody had a kind of fuck it moment or 10 where you
think
find
I was
yourself
at about 39 39 fuck it moments, and then
you're
there was
on,
zero fucks to give anymore. So
you're
daily.
on the couch
Yeah.
with the potato chips again, watching Netflix, and you're like, something has gone horribly awry. And so I started by going back to my morning exercise routine. Like, that was the first thing I instituted because I was like, it's just not me to not do that. And then I started encouraging people I knew to sort of do a morning commute. So I would then like take a walk with my dog to try to get my mindset reshifted back around. And then I did something very similar to you did. I got very tired of fighting with my teenagers for bandwidth in my house, and I rented a small office space because I could not. I really couldn't focus. Teenagers have less boundaries, by the way, than your children's ages. They just walk in and you're on a Zoom call with a client and they don't care. So it for me, it was not functional to be home. Now, I like the flexibility. I like the in-between if I didn't have to be there, but I did need the space to be dedicated to sit and be effective and efficient. But I think as a leader, the reason I said that is being mindful that what works for you doesn't always work for everybody else. So you said this, hey guys, no pressure, because some people couldn't find childcare, or some people couldn't get there because of other reasons. So I think for leaders, being aware of what works for you, we just talked about this before on the last episode, what works for you doesn't always work for other people. Just encourage your team to figure out what works for them, I think is really, really important.
Yeah, that self-awareness, I think we all sort of had to take a deeper look in during this situation, and kind of become more self-aware of the person that we had allowed ourselves to become given the pandemic. I think I've yet to have a conversation with someone that didn't falter to some degree in who they were pre-COVID. Giving up certain habits or taking on new habits. You said, I started taking naps, and it wasn't very long before you're like, this isn't me. Yeah. I wake up in the morning and I'm like, I'm Mr. Hunter. I'm going for the fight. I love the game. I'm going to go play. And then, at 11 o'clock, you're like, well, I think I'll lay down for a little bit. Or Stacie, you and I, we shared several stories where we're like, well, why in the heck am I so, tense all the time, and I haven't been doing the things that fill my bucket and allow me to be the best self that I can. And that self-awareness is really key. I think that plays a big part into the ability to have a positive mindset. So I think let's talk about, maybe, did you notice any of that in your team after you sort of made that shift? How did you then fill that I don't want to say gap, but maybe the necessity for the people on your team to help as their leader, as their coach, to help kind of push them and nudge them back to maybe the person you knew they could be versus maybe who they had allowed themselves to become? Yeah,
I mean, I noticed that there was some issues kind of with the quality and the work that was being delivered, and I was really struggling. Again, I'm a major fan of having mentors, personally having a coach. I was an athlete, and I'm always looking for constructive criticism. Like, what can I change here to be better, change my mindset. And so the thing once that happened was, hey, every day first thing in the morning, we're going to have a 15-minute team meeting, video chat, just see everybody, I'm just such an in-person person that, talking on the phone with somebody just doesn't really do it for me. And hey, let's get on the phone. Let's talk about what's going on. How's your weekend? Just kind of get, build that rapport again, because it's been a couple of months since we'd seen each other. So that happens every day religiously. And then the second part of it is a couple of years ago, my coach, who is, I guess, a strategist in reverse engineering outcomes, was really adamant about writing a vision statement. And I've gone through, 25 versions of this vision statement for our team. And so now every week, at the start of the week, a different team member will read what our team vision is to make sure that we're in alignment. And there's been a lot of value in doing that. And my coach said, hey, Ted, you need to bring this thing out, and you need to make sure that it's in your team's face, because if they know what the goal is for everybody's going to become a winner. So I truly believe that. Every week, somebody will say, maybe we ought to change this or change that. So we're constantly doing it, but it's not me changing it. It's, hey, what are the recommendations from the team? How can we incorporate this to make sure that there's alignment there? And in doing so, I've been really, really proud on how my team has responded, and just continuing to build kind of a support structure around me to make sure that when I'm working, and when I'm with my family, I'm with my family, and when I'm playing, I'm playing. So, I mean, that's kind of by design. That's what I've worked to do.
Yeah, leaders that you're listening to this, the thing that I think we all need to be aware of is that motivation wanes, right? You can be an incredible motivator, but if you are the singular source of motivation for your team, I implore you to dig deeper into why that is. And really dig into that coach's mindset of how you can get the team to really buy into and adopt their own personal self-awareness and their own personal mindset of seeing things in a motivating factor. Because if they're constantly only relying on you, guess what? You're going to be exhausted as a leader, constantly having to pull people through the mud. It's like pushing what's the saying? Pushing a limp rope uphill.
Yeah. I think one thing that you talked about is accountability as well. I think that I use this kind of parallel a lot. Personal trainers, there's a lot of them for a reason, because if people know why they should get fit and why they should eat healthy, and they even know the what to do, but it's the accountability of somebody who is holding you accountable. And so I think for your team, having a function where they understand that they're accountable to each other to be on that call, and they're also accountable to the vision. But I was hoping you could share with us a little bit. You don't have to share, you can share your vision or the team vision or not, but also just how your journey, kind of how did you formulate that? So as leaders are looking to maybe do that process?
Yeah, great question. So, I don't know, 3 years ago, I'd been in a position where I'd had 3 consecutive years of being my best year ever. I was totally hyped on it, stoked. I'm in a place in my career that I never thought that I would personally be, but my life balance was way out of whack. And really what it came down to is that I found myself working all the time and really being in a position where I always was on the phone. And again, I realized some self-awareness that when I'm working, I'm not a good father. I'm not a good husband. And I'm kind of always checked out. And that's something that was a serious issue for me. And so I needed to figure out that work-life balance. And so I went to, there's a great friend of mine through a charity group, Executive Council Charities. His name's Brian North. I met him. He has a terrific luxury real estate company. And I just said, hey, how'd you get here? And he just said, I relied on some coaches and to help me get to where I'm at. And I was relentless on him until I got a name. And then I was relentless calling the coach every week until he returned my call, and he just said, yeah, let's give it a shot. So that's kind of by design how that happened. And one of the first components of, how I got to where I'm at now is that right when we started, he said, every day I want you to write down every task you do and timestamp it. And he did it for 2 weeks. I hated it. I mean, all day long, every time you go to the bathroom, every time you check an email, every time you do, you send an email, anytime you go through a lease, any of that stuff, I want you to document how much time that takes. And after 2 weeks, he did an assessment, and almost 22 hours a week of, the 50 hour work week that I was doing, 22 hours of that was doing just tasks and stuff that was non-client facing and things that wasn't going to generate revenue. So immediately he said, hey, we need to start building a team around you to help take these tasks off your plate, and also put together a scenario where you kind of time block certain things throughout your day so that you can be really, really productive. Because I'm, ADD, squirrel, phone call, great, let's do that. And really try to put some discipline around kind of time stamping, how your day is going to be, and then also making sure that you delegate. So I started with one employee, and everything that we do is a standard operating procedure, so it's done the way that I would do it. And since then, we brought on 2 other people. So I've got a team of 4 now that we have 65 standard operating procedures on how we communicate with clients, what happens when things come in, how do they get delegated, who's responsible for what. And then we also follow up with that every morning on our daily call. So
awesome. Yeah. I want to pull out a couple of things that you said. I think it's really relevant to think about right now, that balance in life, because I think a lot of people are struggling because there's no separation between their work and their home life. And so if you're sitting in your living room to do conference calls and your kids are sitting right next to you on their homeschool, I think it is really challenging for people, as my daughter texts me right now, yeah. It's really challenging for people to understand, to create clear lines, but I think it's really important. You may not be able to physically leave your home to have that separation in space, but I think to the point you made, it's really time boxing things so that you can create those boundaries. Mm-hmm. I think in the absence of those boundaries, everything does bleed together. So I've heard with my clients, I've heard the duality of life right now for employers versus employees. Employers feel like they're getting less work product and people are maybe not working as hard. But on the employee side, there's actually evidence that people are working longer hours. Mm-hmm. It doesn't mean they're as productive. Time is not necessarily productivity for sure, but they're working longer and it's bleeding more into their life than ever before. So again, I don't think everything is ever going to go back to the way it exactly was before. I think there's always going to be a virtual component of work for some of the population. So I think people have to start to get better about creating boundaries around that space for themselves and for their families, because as an entrepreneur, as someone who's done many startups, that line has been blurred many times in my life. And I didn't kind of become aware of it until something happened. And then I was more aware. And with the ages of kids you have, not to sound like the old grandma who's going to give you advice, but I will. My son's a senior and my daughter's a freshman, and you don't get the years back that you guys have ever. And then all of a sudden they have their own lives. My kids are gone more than I'm gone almost. And so you don't ever get the time back that you lose when you don't have appropriate boundaries in place for your life.
Yeah. I lived through this, basically like 2017, 2018, real heavy, a little bit into 2019, where we didn't necessarily, meaning my wife and I, didn't make a conscious decision that I was going to take a certain role within an organization that was going to keep me away from the family, either, through long work days or through travel. In my case, it was travel. And that was a conscious decision to put us 2-3 steps ahead of where we currently were. It just sort of happened. And, unfortunately I missed out on a lot. I was gone quite often. I made justifications for why that was valuable. I was able to say, wow, look at this. There was this bonus and there was this, increase to my base pay and there was all these opportunities. And, unfortunately though, I just lost sight of what the real objective was in that moment. I think I had convinced myself, well, those steps forward are benefiting, and that's why this is okay. But fast forward to now, to your point, the flip side of that is this opportunity has actually countered, and I've been able to actually see the real value in balancing those two and blending them when appropriate and incorporating it. To your point, I think in the past, we've sort of been conditioned that you have to separate work and life. You cannot, you're almost shamed if you do blend them together. And I think that that's a really encouraging thing about the COVID situation, that I am happy to see that we're being forced in some ways. Unfortunately, we had to be forced to accept that blending for people.
Yeah, I think one thing that would be interesting to hear from you about that is what lessons, as you emerged out of that space and you were able to start separating, you're not separating as far as there's always integration. I mean, I'm sure you get phone calls and emails on the weekend. We all do, right? It's a total farce to say that you can clearly have black and white boundaries around personal and professional life. I think for most of us who have clients of some kind or another, they're not always on the same timeline we are. I had a client call me at 7:00 on Friday when I was going to dinner the other night, which happens and is, I have a partner who understands it and accepts it, and it's not the rule, but the exception. But what are the lessons that you learned and you feel like you and your wife learned about, creating a life that has better balance?
Yeah, and great question. I think that it's a little bit, how you choose to design where you want to go and really kind of sticking to it. So my wife holds me wildly accountable for the things that I feel like I need to do, and she's been a terrific advocate for me forever. I mean, number one fan, but if I'm kind of out of the realm of what my commitments are, she's like, hey, I'm holding you accountable to this. So she's been terrific on that end. But I think really where they're a key takeaway that really helped for the work and at home balance is a recommendation that I got from a terrific mentor. Just said, hey, people feel like they need to respond to emails all night long, and that's something that's going to happen. You naturally are in the office and first one in. What's the difference if your client gets a response at 8:30 at night or at 6:30 in the morning? I mean, is it really going to make that world of difference? And on my end, it was like, well, of course, yeah, let's do that. And he said, hey, I want to challenge you for a couple of weeks to see if that happens. And if you lose clients, then, I'll take that back. But I think you ought to try to look at when you go home, not necessarily looking at your phones, but when you go in first thing in the morning, get dialed in, be ready to hustle, answer everything that needs to get done, and make sure, that they're getting what they need. So that was really, really helpful in terms of me getting home and not being glued to my phone. In fact, we're very regimented at home, pick up the kids. My wife drops off in the morning. I pick up the kids. I coach baseball. I'm going to be helping coach soccer. My daughter's in dance. My daughter's starting soccer. So, we got a pretty crazy schedule. But by design, I wanted to be there for those components. So as soon as I kind of pick up the kids, the phone's down, unless there's a call that I feel like I really have to take. Typically, I'll push it off until the next day. And then, kids dinner at 6:30. Dinner with the wife at 7:30, and at 8 I put my phone on the kitchen counter and go melt in the couch and try to hit the reset button so I can hit the day hard again tomorrow. So some days are more hectic than others, but that's, I think, really on my end, the draw to always have to be checking your phone, which then turns into checking your Facebook and your Instagram and your LinkedIn. I think that's time that you're really missing from the people that are really valuable to you, and that's something that you got to be disciplined about when you're going to be scoping that out. So that's really been helpful on my end. And it's so funny because, again, accountability, my wife and I are trying to do that regularly, where we both put our phones down and either we watch a show together or we talk or something along those lines. But when you have the phone there and there's a moment of silence, it's not uncommon to flip it up and start kind of going through stuff. And that drives me crazy. I remind her that drives me crazy, and she reminds me that it drives us crazy. So it's just kind of one of those things. It's like a habit that's just been instilled in the world that we live in today, but trying to just say, hey, let's check out for a little bit, and this is what matters most. And it's been really, really helpful in terms of kind of re-engaging with the family. And again, when I work hard. And when I try to be with the family, I try to be engaged with the family. And when I try to be engaged with my wife, I try to be engaged with my wife. And since that's happened, I've been, a lot happier.
That's great.
Yeah.
That's great. You said the word that you used there, I think, is great for our listeners to pick up on, is design. Designing something, we've described it, Stacie and I, before, purposeful action, right? So when you design something, you're very intentional and purposeful about, we'll take like a room, right? I'm going to be very purposeful that I think the couch should go on that wall. I'm going to hang that piece of artwork there. Nobody just goes in and just designs a room by happenstance. It's very intentional. You mentioned it also previously, and I think this is key for listeners that do manage a team or do lead others. And I'll use the word playbook. You had standard operating procedures for everything. And really it's telling the team, look, we've designed a playbook. I use a sports analogy. When we see this defense, we're going to adjust our play this way. When we see this potential opportunity, here's the play we're going to deploy. I think the same thing goes for your home life. You need to say, look, this is our typical week. And what we're going to do is we're going to design our week to say, look, we get our butts out of bed at this time because that puts us in this situation and gets the kids out the door to where they need to go. We're going to do this, X, Y, Z. You follow that through the day. And here's the key for everybody listening. That does not mean you're so regimented and so rigid that you're immobile and not flexible. That is not what I don't think any of us, the three of us, are saying. You are setting yourself up for success, but you are doing it because you're laying guardrails that guide you through the day in a way that is going to lead you to the other side at a higher level of success than if you would have just let everything just happen as it may come. But that doesn't mean it's always going to go to plan.
Yeah, one thing I want to draw out very specifically, and I think it's a great piece of advice. I've given this piece of advice to some of the CEOs that I coach lately, which is stop responding to people and sending emails at all hours of the day and night. We talked about this before. There's a paternal level of responsibility as a leader, and that you are emulating behavior that you want your team to reflect. And so if it becomes acceptable for you to do that, there's an expectation that's created that they're going to respond. And that's the expectation that creates, stress for teams. And I agree with what you said. I think having clear boundaries on the team, and, obviously that way, if something does come across, you're also going to know it's urgent, right? Mm-hmm. So that there's not so much noise, because it helps you break through the clutter. But I think being respectful of everyone's life and family and their rhythm. I used to tell my team all the time, one of the greatest things I did in teaching fitness was you couldn't call me while I was teaching fitness. Like I'm on a spin bike, yelling at 20 people. I cannot answer the phone. So I'm on do not disturb. But it was a great lesson for me because sometimes when I'd work out, I wouldn't put my phone on do not disturb. And then guess what? Like I'm getting phone calls and text messages during my workout, which is not healthy for my thought process. The whole point in my workout typically for me is space and time to be with myself.
Right.
And if I don't have my phone on do not disturb and all of those things are coming across, I'm distracted by what's coming across.
But how great would that have been for you to answer your team member's call while you're on the spin bike screaming at people?
It would have been.
That would have been great.
I'm not sure that my class would have appreciated it. I'm on the mic.
Yeah. Just, what do you want?
I actually did answer my daughter one time because she called me like 4 times in a row. And I'm like, if the house is burning down, tell me now. Otherwise, I cannot talk to you. What are the other tips that you have that you would just, for leaders that are listening out there, things that you've learned in this process with your team, your family, and your life? What are some tangible things? We love to give people actionable advice. And again, life is hard. We make it simple. The whole point is what are the simple things that they can do? You've already given us some of that. Anything else that you would recommend for people to help them in this process?
Yeah, I mean, I would highly encourage people to go out and seek mentors. People, I feel like, naturally want to go out and help other people. It's just that's typically people love to share their wisdom and what's going on, and I've made a habit of it, of going out and trying to align with people that I really admire, and asking them and just kind of giving them a simple, either an email or a text to just say, I'd really like to connect with you, 2 or 3 times a year, and do you mind if I just kind of share some thoughts, and I'd like you to share some wisdom. And, since I've been doing that for the last couple of years, I haven't had anybody tell me no yet. Sometimes people might say, hey, I might not have time here, but I'd be happy to get together there. But the power of aligning with people that you kind of admire and you hope to one day kind of emulate their habits, it's amazing. They keep you accountable. They help kind of morph your mindset to think about maybe bigger things. And they also kind of, they can provide some guidance with goal setting. I mean, goal setting is a really big component of our team, and where do you want to be and who do you want to be, and is the path that you're going to be on going to get you to where you want to be? And it's a question, we went through the exercise a couple months back, and it was really powerful to hear somebody say, hey, I really don't want to be doing sales. I'd rather be doing support and helping, provide support for the team. And that's really where I see myself going. So it's like, great, now let's morph that to do what you want to do. And thank you for telling me that you don't want to do sales. But, the power of mentors and having people that are a positive influence in your life, they just keep you so grounded. They keep you kind of your eye on the target. And they are also, they're giving free time or their time that's really, really valuable. And I mean, there's lots of compartments in my mind that, there's something that I just think about, or a situation comes up on how I ought to handle it. And it's been invaluable on my end in terms of kind of the journey from where I've been to where I'm going to, where I want to be down the road.
That's great advice.
Anything else that you want to share, Blake, about optimizing this aspect of your life before we seal the deal on the episode?
Yeah. So to just, to kind of recap, I think the leaders should really understand. I think there's a key that we talked about of motivation and mindset and how that it translates out to the team. But I really want to encourage leaders out there that if you can find a way to empower your team to self-motivate, be self-aware, so that you're not the only factor that has to pull them through the mud. You may have to do that. That's the job of a leader. You're going to have to do that at times. But if you don't have an environment right now where your team is sort of self-motivating, and that probably goes to your point, that they don't have a vision, they don't have a clear idea of why are we doing what we're doing. I'd say start there. And I love the advice about going out and seeking a mentor. You'd be surprised at the value that you can get if you just ask.
Absolutely. I have a coach, and I think it's critical to have that level of accountability, to be self-aware. It'd be really nice to just bump through life I say this a lot. I'd love to go back to being not aware because it's a lot easier, but it's not as productive and you're not living, it really in an optimized way, to bring it back to our theme. So we thank you for being with us today.
Thank you. This was a blast.
Awesome. Yeah. We just come here to have a good time. That's all we care about. So thank you for joining us again. And thank you guys for joining Optimized AF on the weekly basis as we continue to share. And please do reach out if you have ideas on what you want to share on how you're optimizing your life, but also questions on where you're looking to optimize.
Absolutely. We'll see you guys next time.
Hey guys, thanks for listening to our show. You can find Blake and I on social media channels at Blake Greyhans and at Stacie Mallon.
Be sure to follow Optimized AF on Instagram and rate and subscribe to this podcast on iTunes. See you next time.